Dave Talks Comics, Episode 54. Who's OHotMU, Part 1.5. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comics I have read and cartoons I have watched. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and at facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. I talk from my notes on these comics. I don't go panel by panel. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This podcast is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comics and cartoons, I may spoil them in some way. On this episode, I will be talking about the Who's Who and the OHotMU. This will be the final installment where I will be talking about the first issue of each of these. And towards that, I just want to mention, I'm kind of renumbering this. So, from here on out, the first time I talk about issue 1, it's 1.1. The first time I talk about issue 2, it's 2.1. This is the 5th time I talk about issue 1 of each of these series, so it's 1.5. Who's OHotMU Part 5, in which I will finish going through the first issues of the official Handbook of the Marvel Universe and Who's Who, the definitive directory of the DC Universe. Starting with Marvel first this time. I am down to the last couple pages. The last 2 pages are on alien races. Now, I read through these, and I got to be honest, none of these are familiar to me. They have, information on where they're from. They all seem to be from the Milky Way galaxy, and they list their first appearances. I'm not sure if I've read any of these comic books, and none of these beings look familiar to me. So the names of these races are the Aakon, that's Aakon, the Askvari, Askvarii, the Archernanians, the Acheltarians, the Alpha Centaurians. Now, I thought I knew who the Alpha Centaurians were because if you've read the original incarnation of the Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the members of the team was Vance Astro, who was an astronaut from Earth, who traveled in deep sleep, I believe, to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star to our sun. But because he was so far away, he had to do it in deep sleep, and it took him 1,000 years to get there. Apparently, there's more than one race, one sentient race in that solar system, Alpha Centauri, and they make some mention of that here. They say that the Alpha Centauri trinary star system boasts other worlds with intelligent life. See Centaurians and Centuri. So I'm thinking, because they don't mention Vance Astro in this entry, that that it must be one of those other races that he encountered when he arrived. Let's see. So there's 3 more alien races. One is the Autocrons, and then the Astrons, and then the Autocrons. And yeah, I got nothing on them. And I prefer not to just read from the book. I prefer to give you something, some insights or some memories that I've got, and I got nothing. So I'm going to move on to the appendix. That's the last thing here. I think I already talked about the editorial, which is here on the first episode of not of Dave Talks Comics, but the first installment of Who's OHotMU, which would have been on episode 33 of Dave Talks Comics. So these are relatively short. The appendix, these are relatively short entries. I mean, just like 2 or 3 sentences at most. Some of them are just a single sentence. So I'm going to go through a few of these. Like Adaptpoid is the first one, and it's a blank, featureless artificial being in human form created by AIM on the model of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s life model Decoy. And it says also see Super Adaptpoid. And I've certainly read some stories with the Super Adaptpoid. For instance, there's an early X-Men story where they battle the Super Adaptpoid, although I think the Super Adaptpoid battled like Captain America and the Avengers and Nick Fury and I think stuff like that. I think that's where the Super Adaptpoid showed up. Okay. So moving along, and I haven't read anything recently with the Super Adaptpoid in it. The next, okay, there's Agatha Harkness here, who I know of. I've seen pictures of her. She's a magic wielder, and she's, I believe, the Fantastic Four's nanny or governess. And at the time this was written, they only had one child, and that was Franklin Richards. Anyway, okay, her first appearance was in Fantastic Four number 94. Next, Agent Axis. This is it says a World War II. I love this description. I don't remember reading this. Let me read the description. A World War II enemy operative in the employ of all 3 Axis powers. He is an entity formed of the freak accidental merger of 3 master spies, 1 German, 1 Japanese, and 1 Italian. His first appearance was in Invaders Annual number 1. Now that description just sounds awesome and crazy and something that Marvel would do. And it's Invaders Annual number 1. I've read Invaders Classic Volume 1, but apparently that issue is in Invaders Classic Volume 2. So I'm going to have to get that and read that because I think there's some more stories in there that I want to read, like the introduction of Masterman and Warrior Woman. And there may be some, I think Thor actually shows up fighting for the Nazis in somewhere in the teens or in the 20s of the Invaders series. Not sure. It may not actually be Thor, but it looked like Thor on the cover that I recall. Okay, moving on. Another World War II based entry, the All Winners Squad. The All Winners Squad, a crime fighting team active in the late 1940s, composed of Captain America 2, the original Human Torch, Submariner, Bucky 2, Toro, Miss America, and the Wizard. And it first appeared in Giant Size Avengers number 1, which is interesting that they say that because if you look it up in the comic book database, there's actually a All Winners Squad that appeared in, I believe it was All Winners Comics. Now, I haven't read any of these stories. Back in the 40s. So they didn't appear in every issue of All Winners Comics. I think it was All Winners Comics. But their first couple appearances of any significance were in Giant Size Avengers 1 and What If number 4. And I don't believe the comic book database doesn't list them as appearing in any issues of Invaders. There was another team whose name escapes me now. It wasn't the All Winners Squad. There was another team that had like the Patriot, and Miss America was on there, and Jack Frost, and they showed up in the first. They were in Invaders Classic Invaders Classic Volume 1, and They had also appeared in Marvel 2 and 1. No, not Marvel 2. Actually, I think they did have an appearance in Marvel 2 and 1, but that one isn't reprinted in Marvel Classics Volume 1. What is reprinted is their appearances in Marvel Premiere numbers 29 and 30 because it was a crossover with Invaders issues 6 and 7, I think. Or maybe 5 and 6 or 5, 6, and 7. Something like that. But that wasn't the All Winners Squad. I'm flipping through the book right now, trying to find it. Because what happened was the Invaders were captured by the Red Skull, the Liberty Legion. That's who it was, the Liberty Legion. And there were some team members in common with the All-Winter Squad. There was the Wizard, the Thin Man, the Red Raven, the Miss America, the Patriot, Jack Frost, the Blue Diamond. Yes, Liberty Legion. Okay, anyway, but this was the All-Winter Squad. And I think they brought them back for, there was a one-shot, All-Winter Squad one-shot a few years ago. But I haven't read that. Next, the Ameridroid. Okay, the Ameridroid was this guy who, a 20-foot-tall android in the form of Captain America, but possessing the mind and power of ex-Nazi spy Lyle Decker. First appearance, Captain America number 218. So his first appearances were in Captain America 218 to 221. I have not read those stories, but what I have read is his second appearances, his second story that he appeared in, which was in Captain America 261 to 263. So he's this giant guy, as the entry implies, who looks just like Captain America, who Captain America has to fight, who was a Nazi spy. I don't know about in that first story, but in the second story, he's working for the Red Skull, and I thought it was one of the first Captain America stories that I read. I had a subscription to Captain America at the time, and the first issue I got was like right smack in the middle of that story. And so I actually had to go back and find the other issues. And I may still be missing one of those, actually, now that I think about it. I think I'm missing I think it's 263 or 264. Actually, it may not be part of that story. It may be following that story. But it's a pretty good story. I mean, if for no other reasons, I think that for nostalgic reasons. And it's drawn by Mike Zeck. And I really like Mike Zeck's artwork. And I think he does a great job he did a great job on Captain America. So moving along, the next entry that sticks out to me is Amphibious. Now, Amphibious first appeared in X-Men number 62, and according to his description, he's a mutant man-frog rescued by Magneto from hostile tribesmen in the Savage Land. And he first appeared, that X-Men 62 was one of those issues that was one part of that run that Roy Thomas did with Neil Adams back in the early 70s, I think it was. Maybe it was the late 60s. I'm not sure the exact date that issue came out. I'm thinking it was late 60s. But it's a pretty cool story, and it's the first time it wasn't the first time that the X-Men met Kazar or traveled to the Savage Land. You have to go all the way back to X-Men number 11 or 10 or 12, 13, somewhere in there. But it was the first time that they battled Magneto in the Savage Land, and I believe it was the first time that they introduced some of those characters those people who he had mutated to make them more powerful, one of whom was Amphibious. Although there's nothing really it's the story more than it is the character. I don't remember anything about Amphibious other than he's kind of like a anthropomorphic almost frog. So he kind of looks like a frog, but he's kind of shaped like a human, kind of. So, moving along, the next entry now this one I don't know anything about, but it made me think of something, and that is Anvil. And it says Johnny Anvil and Hammer Jackson, two escaped convicts, were given a symbiotic energy synthicon device, a chain of some sort, by a benign alien. The synthicon bond gave the two men sufficient superhuman power to battle the Hulk. First appearance, Incredible Hulk 182. Huh. Okay, well that would have been right after Wolverine's first appearance. Interesting. Well, what this made me think of was old wrestling stuff. When I was a kid, I used to watch WWF wrestling on TV, and there was a team, the Hart Foundation. Wait, was it the Hart Foundation? No, not the Hart Foundation. It was Greg the Hammer Valentine and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And so Hammer and Anvil made me think of that. And were they? Maybe that was the Hart Foundation. Them and Brett. Bret the Hitman Hart. Was it 3 men? I can't remember. Anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. So let me get back to the ones I wanted to talk about. Just 3 more. Atom Smasher 2, and the only reason why I'm going to talk about this, because I don't know who this character is because the entry mentions Atom Smasher 1. It says, the brother to the original Atom Smasher, also capable of transforming his body into pure energy. First appearance, Marvel 2-in-1, number 85. But there's no entry for Atom Smasher 1, so I thought it was kind of funny that they would list Atom Smasher 2, but not Atom Smasher 1. But it occurs to me that maybe Atom Smasher 1's name has changed, and so maybe he shows up somewhere else in the OHotMU. I don't know. Okay, so next to last, Autocrons. Now, Autocrons was a leader of the Black Knights of the Universal Church of Truth, and he fought Adam Strange in Strange Tales number 179. And I talked about this on an earlier episode of Dave Talks Comics. If you go back to episode 11, I talked about Warlock because I was reading the reprints of the old Warlock series that were written by Jim Starlin, written and drawn by Jim Starlin. And I thought that was a pretty good story, and you should probably, I'm not going to rehash, I can't remember everything I said then, but I really liked the artwork and the way the story was told, and it also, was part of the story that led to, I believe, Warlock's first encounter with Thanos. The final entry here is Avalanche, and I'm a little surprised that he only gets, I guess he wasn't very well known at this point, and honestly, I didn't look him up to see how well known he has become or how much he has been used since then. But Avalanche was a member of the New Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He is able to disintegrate inanimate objects with his touch. See Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. First appearance, X-Men number 141. And X-Men 141, of course, is the first part of 2 of the Days of Future Past story. So that's something you should definitely read. I have reread it in the last few years. I did not talk about it on this podcast, but it's a good story, and I think an Avalanche plays a part in the story that takes place in the present, because it's kind of split between the present and the future, where Kitty Pryde goes into the future, and I know they did this different in the movie, although I haven't seen the movie yet, where it's Wolverine who goes into, or actually, I'm not sure exactly how it works. But because I think in the movie Wolverine goes into the past, not into the future. I've certainly listened to podcasts where they've talked about it. But so that's it for the first issue of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. And that's it for the A's for Marvel. So the next issue will begin with characters who start with the letter B, and I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm not sure who is the first character. Moving along to the DC side of the house, the who's who, the definitive directory of the DC universe, I'm going to finish off now the first issue of that series. There aren't as many entries as there were. There's no appendix. There are no alien races in the back of the who's who. So I just have 5 characters left to go through. The first one is the Golden Age Atom, the Atom of Earth 2. His alter ego is Al Pratt. He initially didn't have any superpowers. He was just a guy who trained a lot and got into really good shape and then put on a blue and yellow and brown and red outfit and fought crime that way. He was a member of the Justice Society of America. His first appearance was in All-American Comics number 19, where he had an ongoing feature, and his solo appearances there were from He appeared in All American Comics 19 through 46. He wasn't in issue 47. Then he was in from 48 to 61, and then also 70 through 72. After that, he made appearances in Flash Comics. He wasn't in every single issue, but his first appearance in Flash Comics was in issue 80, and his last appearance was in issue 104, which was the last of the Golden Age run of Flash Comics. After that, it would be discontinued, but then revived in I think it was in the 60s. It may have been the late 50s, when Barry Allen was introduced as the Silver Age Flash, or the Flash of Earth 1. The Golden Age Atom also appeared as a member of the Justice Society of America in All-Star Comics. He was in all but two issues of All-Star Comics from 3 through 57, which was basically the Golden Age run of the Justice Society in All-Star Comics. And I always liked, he was also a member of the All-Star Squadron, and he was one of the first, he was in the first issue of All-Star Squadron, and he wasn't always in the book, but I always liked him, I guess because he was a non-powered character, and I don't know, I liked his costume, and I got nothing else. Okay, the Atom 2 is the next character, or the Silver Age Atom. His real name is Ray Palmer, and he first appeared in Showcase number 34. Now, unlike the Golden Age Atom, he actually did have a superpower, which was to shrink down in size. Now, it was a technological thing, like a lot of the Silver Age heroes were. Their powers either were derived from technological things, science fiction type things, or they had some devices. Like, Hawkman had the wings, which were made of nth metal, and the Atom had this belt, which I believe he had created, which, yes, from white dwarf matter, which allowed him to shrink down in size. And so, and I think I actually encountered the Silver Age Atom first, Ray Palmer. I think he was in the Super Friends cartoon, and I probably saw him there because I was really introduced to a lot of the DC characters through cartoons before I was through the comic books. But let's see. Oh, I forgot to say something. There was one thing I forgot to mention about the Atom of Earth 2, the Golden Age Atom, was that his costume changed in the late 40s, around 1948, and he actually did get some superpowers, and that was the residual effect of his exposure to radiation when he was battling cyclotron, which happened in All-Star Squadron number 25, 26, something like that. And that was kind of now that story came out in the 80s, the early 80s, but his costume had actually changed back in the late 40s. And I don't think there had ever been a reason given, and so this was, and he also seemed to become super strong at that point, I believe, back in the Golden Age. And he certainly was shown wearing that outfit in his Silver Age appearances in the crossovers between the Justice Society and the Justice League in the Justice League of America comic book. And so his costume changed. I kind of like the original one a little better, although the newer one has a fin, and that's kind of cool. But similarly, the Atom of Earth 1, Ray Palmer, also had a costume change. In the early 80s, he had a break with his wife, and he ends up traveling to the Amazon and living in shrunken size for some time. And there was a miniseries called Sword of the Atom that there was a miniseries, a 4-issue miniseries, Sword of the Atom, and then there was, I think, 3 specials that told that story. Now, this wasn't the first time that he had his own book. He actually had his own book starting in 1962. Well, he first appeared in Showcase number 34, 35, and 36, and that was in 61. And then in 62, from 62 to 69, he had first a book of his own called Atom, which ran for 38 issues, and then Atom and Hawkman each had their own books, but then they combined them into one book called Atom and Hawkman. And that ran for another 6 issues, from 39 to 45. They continued the numbering from the Atom. And then that was discontinued, and then that was in 1969, and then up until 1983, so for another 14 years, he didn't have his own book, but he continued to make regular appearances in the Justice League of America book, which he was a regular member of the Justice League. And I've certainly read some of those stories. I have read The Sword of the Atom, and there's the 4-issue miniseries. There was 3 specials that followed. And then after that, there was another series called Power of the Atom, and I've read part of that. The Sword of the Atom issues, all 7 of them are collected. There's a collected edition around. If you do a search on Amazon for Sword of the Atom, you should find it. And after Power of the Atom, which I think ended in 1989, there really wasn't anything I don't think the Ray Palmer Atom. There is another character, I believe Ryan Choi, I think is his real name, who got a book back in like 2005-ish, something like that. But as far as the Ray Palmer Atom, I believe that's the last time he had a regular series, was 1989. Although, once again, he continued to make appearances in Justice League books and things of that nature. Okay, there were 3 more characters, which 2 of whom I have very little experience with. One is the Atomic Knight. Now, this is a character, I remember a friend when I was in like 6th grade telling me about this, the Atomic Knights, and they appeared. He was the leader of this team. His real name was Gardner Grail, and he first appeared in Strange Adventures number 117, and he worked at Star Labs, and he was part of an experiment where he went into a sensory deprivation chamber, and somehow he developed mental powers, and he's wearing this suit. And so a lot of these adventures take place in a post-apocalyptic Earth after World War III, and he and some other people who are the Atomic Knights go on certain adventures. Now, I'm really talking from just what I know from this entry, because I have not read any of these stories. There is a collected edition. They're collected in a couple of places. I believe there's a hardback that just collects all their appearances in Strange Adventures, and these weren't all consecutive issues, but they had 15 appearances from Strange Adventures 117 through 160. There is a showcase that collects those along with some other post-apocalyptic stories like Commandy, and I can't remember what else. I looked it up the other day, but I can't remember what else. But the hardcover just collects the Strange Adventures issues, those 15 stories. And to me it sounds a little bit like the Doom Patrol or Challengers of the Unknown, in that it's a little more offbeat type of storytelling. So it sounds kind of neat. It sounds like something I might enjoy, and maybe someday I'll get around to reading it. It's not high on my priority list, but it sounds like something worth checking out if I'm looking for something. I'm not sure if I run across this book at a convention for the right price, I might pick it up. Okay, the next character is the Atomic Skull. I got nothing on this other than what's in here. He's somebody else who had a connection. He's the former director of Star Labs, and he's now a professional criminal. He really does not have very many appearances, especially in the first 20 years. He first showed up in 1978, and in Superman number 323, and he was so obviously a Superman villain. It says he's capable of firing devastatingly powerful energy bolts through the visor of his mask, which can render even his archfoe Superman unconscious. Blah, 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 blah. Something about seizures in here. Okay, yeah, and like I said, he hasn't been used very much over the years. From 1978 to 1998, as far as publishing history goes, he only appeared 10 times, according to Comic Book DB. So that's all I got on Atomic Skull. And then the final character is Auron. Now, Auron I do know a little bit about because he has connections to the Omega Men. And in particular, he showed up he first appeared in Green Lantern number 141, which I do not have. I have not read. It's one of those comics I would like to get, but I think it's a little pricey. And it's not the sort of thing I find at comic book conventions when I go looking for this sort of stuff. He has connections to the Omega Men, although when I look through his entry in Comic Book DB, it seems like he's not in every single issue. He's kind of a godlike being who, it says he's possessed of almost godlike powers which have yet to be fully tested. He can fly, speeding across the heavens on a light bridge of his own creation. Though he wishes otherwise, Auron also acts as Zal's messenger of death, using his awesome powers to destroy his mother's enemies, and Zal is his mother. So he showed up in a story that I read completely read back in, a couple years ago, I think it was, before I started doing the podcast. It was a crossover between the Teen Titans and the New Teen Titans, the New Teen Titans and the Omega Men, which this was before the Omega Men got their own series, but I think this was basically the last story before they did. And it's in New Teen Titans number 23, 24, 25, and annual number 1. And when I was a kid, I bought annual number 1 off the newsstand, off at a drugstore. And I loved it. It's, this is at the time when Marv Wolfman and George Perez were doing the story. And it's a great sci-fi story. Basically what happens is that Starfire, Coriander, gets abducted by her evil sister, Blackfire. I can't remember her real name. And so the Titans have to go on a mission to rescue her. And somewhere along the way, they meet up with the Omega Men, and they end up helping the Omega Men. It turns out that they have common goals because they both want to go after these people who have kidnapped Starfire. And so you get some background on, I think this was the first time you really got a lot of background on Starfire, on who she was. And, I mean, in a way, it's kind of, I guess you could, now that I think about it, it's a little reminiscent of some of the X-Men's outer space adventures a bit, but I thought it was a really cool story, and even rereading it just a couple years ago, I really enjoyed it. It's certainly been collected in at least one or two different forms, and I think the issues aren't that expensive, because these aren't, I remember paying something like $1 or $2 for them in a back issue bin, something like that. So it's a great story, but like I said, Auron only has irregular appearances in this. In the Omega Men, it's like he'd be in one issue, then he'd skip about 10 issues before he'd show up again. So I don't know a whole lot more about him, but so that's it for Who's Who. The first issue of Who's Who. The only thing that's left is on the inside back cover. They list a lot of the characters and the comic books that they were appearing in the time. So whether it was their own comic book or another comic book. Like, for instance, let's see, Auron is a member of the Omega Men, it says. And the Atomic Knight debuts? What? That's crazy. Debuts means its first appearance, doesn't it? Well, it says debuts in Wonder Woman number 324. And Atom will reappear in April's Sword of the Atom special number 2. And the Golden Age Atom appears regularly in All-Star Squadron and Infinity Inc., both of which I have talked about on previous issues of Dave Talks Comics. Anyway, that's it for the first issue, and I believe that's it for the A's for the Who's Who. There may be one or two more A's. Actually, you know what? Let me take a quick look and see what the first character is. Wow, I got to go all the way to the bottom of this stack because of the way I got these books stacked up here. Yes, no, there is one more character, one more A. But that's it for the first issue of the Who's Who, the definitive directory of the DC Universe. And next time I do a Who's OHotMU, I will be starting with the second issue. And hopefully that won't be too long from now. It took me 5 installments to get through the first issue of Who's Who and the OHotMU. And I guess we'll have to see how I do in the future. Just wanted to point out that there are 2 websites that came in very handy when doing this kind of episode, and those are Comic Book DB, which can be found at comicbookdb.com, and the Grand Comics Database, which can be found at comics.org. And if you have any questions about comic books, if you're trying to do some research, of course Wikipedia is also a good resource, but both of those are great resources. That's it for episode 54 of Dave Talks Comics. Questions or comments can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com, or you can post them at facebook.com/davetalkscomics. Or if you've gotten this far, why don't you tweet Ray Palmer to @DaveTalksComics. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about the Micronauts. I recently read the special edition of the Micronauts, and I'll be the special edition reprint of the Micronauts. I'll be talking about that some more, what that means on that episode. And maybe I'll be talking a little bit about cartoons I've been watching. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.